Hello, welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm your host, Chris. The character of Usagi Yojimbo is an anthropomorphic rabbit set in 16th century feudal Japan. Now, it's been coming out since 1984. It's the creation of writer, artist, and letterer Stan Sakai. When you look at this, you're thinking, okay, it's a historical drama. It's been coming out for over 35 years. It's a talking animal book. These all sound like potential roadblocks to a new reader, but it's been gaining new readers and winning tons of awards for its entire run. There's a reason for that. I'm going to talk about what makes it so special. The fact that it's an all-ages book that's exciting for readers and it's easy to jump in almost anywhere in the run. So without any further ado, let's talk about Usagi Yojimbo. Stan Sakai originally planned on doing a series about the famous Japanese swordsman Miyamoto Musashi, who lived in the late 16th century into the 17th century. He was a ronin, a samurai without a lord, and he was undefeated in over 60 duels in his lifetime. Sakai explained in an interview with Comic Culture that he was doodling and came up with a rabbit using his ears as a topknot, and decided to change Miyamoto Musashi to Miyamoto Usagi, where Usagi is Japanese for rabbit. Sakai then intended Usagi to be a supporting character in his fantasy series The Adventures of Henry Nilsson and Groundthumper. However, he ultimately ended up being his own character, debuting first in Albedo Anthropomorphics No. 2. On a somewhat related note, a popular and famous comic based on Miyamoto Musashi began in 1998 by manga artist Takehiko Inoue and is still running today. That series, Vagabond, is manga. Usagi Yojimbo is a black and white comic about Japan's history, but it is not manga. It's aimed at Western readers, with frequent editor's notes providing a translation or explaining a piece of Japanese history. Sakai is a third-generation Japanese-American and decided to use Usagi Yojimbo to tell the real history of Japan through fictional funny animal characters. The setting, known as the Edo-period, was when the 16th century drew to a close. This was the end of generations of civil war across Japan, as a time of peace finally arrived when the shogunate took control of the country. But with it came the end of the need for the samurai warrior class. In the comics, Usagi Yojimbo loses his lord and becomes a ronin, wandering the country on a musha shugyo, a warrior's pilgrimage. In effect, this allows the comics to tell different types of stories, with Usagi fighting for the downtrodden against ninjas, monsters, rebels, and other dangers. Some stories can tell bits of history, like the creation of kites. Others may be a locked room mystery with local detectives. And still others can be about fights with evil ninjas, like the Neko clan. Usagi's stories can jump around in time with flashbacks to his days being taught in the ways of a samurai by Katsuichi. Usagi's lord is Mifune, named after famous Japanese actor Toshiro Mifune, who starred in many samurai films like Seven Samurai. Visually, one of Usagi's frequent companions, Gen, is based on the look of Toshiro Mifune from movies like Yojimbo. Gen is always thinking about how he can profit and get a reward from a situation. He's a real scoundrel. Several characters are named after either real people or film characters. Usagi's ally Tomo Ame is based on the real-life female samurai Tomo Gozen. The blind samurai Zato Ino is based off of Zatoichi movies featuring a blind swordsman. And one of Usagi's recurring enemies is the unkillable Jay. If you add the Japanese honorific to the end of his name, Jay-san is based in part off of the unstoppable Jason Voorhees. But perhaps more important than the names are the animals each character is based on. Usagi Yojimbo's world features anthropomorphic animals, but they still have animals in their world. They ride horses, see dolphins, and hunt wild game. There are also small dinosaur lizards, just because Stan Sakai likes drawing them. The characters are based on animals that either play into or subvert expectations for personality matching animal nature. Usagi's teacher, Katsuichi, is a regal lion. Tomo Ame is an agile feline. Jay is a preying wolf. Usagi's ally, Gen, is a stubborn rhino. In an early Usagi story, Usagi aids a young lord, Norioki, who is portrayed as an innocent-looking panda. One cool thing about Usagi Yojimbo is its consistency in artwork, tone, and quality. That's because Stan Sakai has written, illustrated, and lettered every issue. He owns the character. That also means he's taken it to different publishers depending on who has best been able to get his story out there. Albedo Anthropomorphics was through Thoughts and Images, but by 1987, Usagi Yojimbo got an ongoing series at Fantagraphics, who published 42 issues. Sakai then moved the character to Mirage Studios for 16 issues. Mirage was the publisher of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which was another black and white book with anthropomorphic characters, also featuring martial arts, that started 1 year earlier in 1983. In fact, from the earliest days, the creators have had crossovers in their comics and cartoons. A lot of people first got introduced to Usagi Yojimbo because of his appearances in the Ninja Turtles cartoons. Sakai next took Usagi to his longest home, Dark Horse Comics, where they published over 170 issues, plus reprints of the earlier series. In 2019, Usagi Yojimbo moved to IDW, which printed both new stories and color reprints. Recently, Sakai announced the character is returning to Dark Horse under his new imprint, Dogu. It's very easy to jump into an Usagi Yojimbo comic, even nearly 40 years in, because most stories are only one issue or maybe 2 or 3. It's very episodic. Stan Sakai will give the reader context for the story with either a historical prologue or dialogue explaining what you need to know that's relevant to that story. Of course, long-term readers get the advantage of seeing the characters in context over a longer period of time and can see them grow and change in interesting ways. But the one I want to talk about today, the story I want to talk about today, is called the Grasscutter Saga, and it bucked that trend of shorter stories in a big way. It was a 10-issue epic, and I think it shows a lot of the things that make Usagi Yojimbo special. Let's talk about that story. The Grasscutter Saga is a story based on the real-life sword Kusanagi no Tsurugi, which has history that extends into legends involving deities known as kami. In an interview with Comics Beat, Sakai said this story took him 5 years to research properly, but the story moves at a brisk pace. The first 2 issues are a series of prologues that tell us a condensed version of the various kami that gave birth to Japan and the legendary warrior Susanoo, who slew a 7-headed beast and found the sword within, a gift from the gods. The sword gets the name Grasscutter when it is used to cut grass that was on fire and surrounding a warrior. The sword is one of 3 sacred objects that are said to show the godly lineage of the imperial family. But the sword was lost in a fierce ocean battle at the end of the 12th century. These prologues are a fascinating entry point into both Japanese history and mythology. They also feature artwork that is epic in scope and extremely detailed. The Usagi comics are a bit of a history lesson disguised within an exciting story. The world of Usagi Yojimbo may feature animals and be a cartoon, but it features serious topics and plenty of violence. The violence in Usagi Yojimbo is almost always bloodless, but is still portrayed as serious. People die, and usually show that they are in great pain, agony, or fear. After the prologue, we see that the tale was being recapped by one of the 8 lords who are part of a conspiracy to put the emperor back in charge of Japan, unseating the shogun. The leader, Kotetsu, plans to recover Grasscutter, which will rally the people around the emperor. He plans to do this with the help of a witch, Ryoku, who will control the crabs at the bottom of the sea, said to house the souls of the imperial guard. Kotetsu's secret plan is to then control the emperor with Ryoku's powers. The politics, architecture, food, and clothing of the comics are all well researched to be appropriate to the Edo period. When the sword is actually pulled up, Usagi Yojimbo happens to be the one who finds it. Kotetsu's warriors attack Usagi, which convinces him that he holds the actual Grasscutter sword. Usagi's moral dilemma is at the heart of the story. If he gives it to the emperor, it will restart civil war. If he gives it to the shogun, it will be used for political purposes and also lead to fighting. Usagi determines it is safest with him, but he is pursued by multiple factions aware of the sword's existence. Kotetsu's forces chase after him. Ryoko's animal familiar Katanamono hunts him down. Even the evil warrior Jay is drawn in. Into the chaos, many of Usagi's allies are slowly drawn in. Gen, local bounty hunters, Lord Noriyuki, and Tomo Ame, even the deadly warrior Inazuma. One of the Neko ninjas learns of the conspiracy and attempts to bring the news back to Lord Hikiji, but is killed by Katanamono. Lord Hikiji is the main antagonist for Usagi. He's the lord who killed Usagi's master, and he aspires to be the shogun. He's also, interestingly, human. He's often mentioned, but rarely shows up. While Usagi has the moral conflict of what to do with the Grasscutter sword, and he's at the heart of all the action, the greatest character arc actually falls to a smaller supporting character from one of Usagi Yojimbo's earliest stories, the shamed General Ikeda. Everyone in the orbit of Grasscutter and Usagi deals with upheaval. Gen is captured by local police, battles bandits, and tries to claim the bounty on Inazuma. She is injured but recovered by Jay. Jay is interesting in that he believes he is the instrument of gods sent to kill sinners, but he sees everyone as a sinner, with the exception of the young girl Keiko, who he once rescued and who he will not harm. She convinces Jay that Inazuma is an innocent and needs medical care at a nearby temple. Lord Noriyuki is ambushed by traitors while he and Tomo head to Edo to give their fidelity to the new shogun. Kotetsu sends his men and bribes others to turn on the young lord. Tomo and Noriyuki end up on the run and seek shelter at a farm run by a man who calls himself Ike, but who clearly has skill fighting and commanding. He is really General Ikeda, who helped try to overthrow Noriyuki's father, but failed. He has become a farmer and started a family, and is content, but wonders if he should exact revenge on Noriyuki for the sins of his father. Ultimately, Ikeda opts to help Noriyuki and Tomo cross the mountains to get back into safe territory. His true nature is revealed by traitors, but he still risks his life to aid Tomo and Noriyuki crossing a bridge to escape to safety. It's an emotionally satisfying arc to a flawed character on a redemption story. Concurrently, Usagi has lost the sword to Katanamono and chases after him. He's exhausted after a battle, but fortunately, Gen finds him and Usagi presses him into helping. Katanamono bumps into Jay, who ultimately is victorious in battle and gains control of Grasscutter. And upon Katanamono's death, the witch Ryoko falls apart into crow feathers. Ultimately, Gen and Usagi battle Jay, and Usagi seemingly kills Jay in battle. Usagi Yojimbo comics are never slow and dull. They feature a samurai, and fighting is at the core of every story, and the fights are usually very fast, as in real life. Lord Noriyuki reaches safety and offers Ikeda his position reinstated. Instead, Ikeda says he prefers being a farmer and asks for his son to be allowed to become a samurai when he is old enough, which is granted. Usagi takes the sword to a nearby temple and agrees to a plan by the high priest. They decide they will swap it with the well-known replica housed at Atsuta Shrine to hide it in plain sight for all. While it's a happy ending, it still features a grisly and mysterious cliffhanger where the priests of the nearby temple are found to have been murdered by someone inside the temple. The artwork of Usagi is clean and clear and has a strong style. Fights are chaotic and detailed, but often just a panel or two indicating that the battles are fast. There's an accuracy to the architecture and clothing, and because the characters have simple features, it's easy to envision yourself as the reader within the story. Grasscutter means more if you've read the previous issues because you understand who those characters are and you've seen them progress and change, but it's a fantastic standalone story. It features everything great about Usagi Yojimbo comics. History, mythology, action, character development, even the supernatural. There's a lot to like about Usagi Yojimbo. It will teach you about honor and courage, which really encapsulates the samurai ethos. I think that one important thing about the comics to know is that there's no bad place to jump in. That's a really cool period. If you're interested at all in the Edo period or the samurai ethos, I really think that Usagi Yojimbo comics are a fantastic place to either start or continue your journey. Thanks so much for watching. This was a really fun one for me to do because it's a comic that I love. I know sometimes when I do indie comics, there's not always as many people that are familiar, but hopefully if you haven't heard of it or you've heard of it but you haven't really read it, you've made it this far. And if you already read Usagi Yojimbo, hopefully I've given it at least a little more context for you to potentially appreciate. Either way, great comic, and the great thing about even though it's moved to different publishers, is that IDW and Dark Horse have both been fantastic at issuing reprints in big, thick trade paperbacks that are a fantastic value, much cheaper than buying the individual issues these days. So I definitely recommend looking into that. Thank you so much. This is definitely a really fun one. I'll be back next week with another Comic Tropes episode. By the way, I also have a weekly live show that's on my second channel, which is titled Pros and Cons, and that's on Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific. That's a lot of fun where I recap the comics and the comic book news of the past week. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you very soon, and until then, keep reading comics. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please consider hitting like and subscribe. If you'd like to support the show, there are merchandise links beneath the YouTube video, and you can always hit join on YouTube or visit Comic Tropes on Patreon to get access to special perks. Usagi Yojimbo is a black and white comic about Japan, yeah. Is based on the real-life female sword... Well, almost got it. The bland... How about blind?